Wait a minute. Wait a minute. You ain't heard nothing yet.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Why don't you come up sometime, see me?
Rated bar! Top of the world!
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
The stuff that dreams are made of.
Hey everybody, Kirk here. I just want to say before we start the episode, make sure you follow us on Twitter.
And Facebook.
And if you enjoy the episode, make sure to leave us a rating and a comment on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
We love to hear your feedback, and you can find us on any social media by searching Silver Screen Time Machine.
We appreciate your feedback. Look forward to hearing from you.
Hello, and welcome to Silver Screen Time Machine, Wendy and Kirk's classic film review. Hi, Kirk.
Hello, Wendy. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
So we're going to get on our time machine, Kirk, and we're going to go back to 1935.
All right.
And we're going to talk about a film that I particularly like, my pick. It's called The Dark Angel.
All right.
This is a very obscure film. Many people have not heard of this film. Had you heard of this film?
I had not until you brought it up.
Yeah, this is a very obscure film. Sadly obscure because I think it deserves a little better. I'm putting out a plea right here on our Silver Screen Time Machine podcast for some wonderful person, whoever's in charge of these things, to do a restoration on this film. So whether that will be heard or not, I don't know. But I'm putting out my plea.
Get on it, Criterion Collection. We know you're listening.
Yes, Criterion, that is a good, yes, please do. This film deserves better. The reason I say that is because I'm going to start out with the most notable person and related to this film, which is Greg Toland. Greg Toland is a cinematographer. Hopefully I'm saying his name right. A very critically acclaimed cinematographer. Actually could be considered one of the best cinematographers ever. He is the man that did Citizen Kane.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And many other films,
Sure.
Not just Citizen Kane. He was nominated for 6 Academy Awards. He won 1 for Wuthering Heights.
Okay.
Greg Toland, I'm going to talk just very briefly about him. He started as an office boy and he moved up to an assistant cameraman and then a cinematographer. He is a very innovative cinematographer and he's known for creating different techniques and known for his work on Citizen Kane. In fact, a lot of the credit given to Orson Welles for his pioneering techniques on Citizen Kane should probably be properly credited to Greg Toland.
Okay.
But we are going to talk about Greg Toland a lot in an upcoming episode because we are going to talk about Citizen Kane.
Yes.
So I'm going to leave that as is for now.
All right.
But the fact that he did the cinematography on this film, you can find this film on YouTube for free. It looks like a public domain film.
It does. Yeah, it's not in good shape.
It desperately needs a restoration. I'd love to see it restored to what it used to look like, especially when he did the cinematography, because it must be very beautiful.
Sure.
So I'm hoping someday that happens. In the meantime, if you want to watch this film, I think you do have to see it on YouTube. It's really hard to find. I looked in our library system and there was no copies on DVD of this particular film.
And I was looking, just browsing around online. I don't even know if this has ever been put on DVD or Blu-ray. I couldn't find a copy of it anywhere, at least not in a U.S. format.
Yeah, you can at least see it on YouTube if you want to see this film. This film was produced by Sam Goldwyn, who was a big producer. This was his production company. This was not when he was a studio. Distributed by United Artists. This film is directed by Sidney Franklin. Sidney Franklin was also nominated for an Oscar, not for this film, but for The Good Earth, which is a really good film. He began filmmaking back when he was in school, and he wound up catching the attention of D.W. Griffith, who had him create some children's films, and that's how he started out. And he's kind of known for bringing literary classics to the screen.
Okay.
This film started out as a play. It's by an English playwright named Guy Bolton. He wrote The Dark Angel in 1925. He wrote a lot of musical comedies, Guy Bolton. Anything Goes.
Oh, really?
The Easter Parade, Till the Clouds Roll By. And he's actually a longtime friend and collaborator with P.G. Wodehouse, who was a very popular British humorous fictional novelist.
Okay.
Actually, my mom really likes him. That's the only reason I know his name.
Sure.
My mom is a big fan of his. So if you ever want to pick up a P.G. Wodehouse book, my mom thinks they're very good. And then the screenplay was adapted by Lillian Hellman, who's also a well-known playwright. She was a person very ahead of her time. She wrote The Children's Hour. Which,
oh, really?
Yes, which is a play that they wind up adapting to film and Audrey Hepburn
Sure.
starred in. It's a very cutting-edge story for the time period.
Absolutely.
It's about two women who run a boarding house and are accused of being lesbians.
Yeah.
And they aren't actually lesbians, but there's such a stigma about it that it winds up ruining their boarding house business. It's a very cutting-edge material, especially for when she wrote it.
I didn't realize that. I knew that was based on a play, but I didn't realize it was that old. Because even for the time the movie came out, that was pretty intense.
Yes, it was, yeah. So Lillian Hellman, and she also wrote The Little Foxes, which she received an Oscar nomination for. And one of the quotes I like from her was, "I will not cut my conscience to fit this year's fashion."
Oh, wow.
So that tells you a little bit about her.
Very cool.
So this film nominated for some Oscars.
Yes.
Won an Oscar in art direction, which I must say is not my strong suit as to what exactly art direction it comprises. I know it usually comprises the set.
Everything from set design to
Yes.
costuming. And I know there's separate Oscars for costumes too, so I don't know where it blends over. But the sets to me, and I don't know, did you want to get into this now?
I didn't think they were anything spectacular.
No, they were definitely sets.
Well, it's 1935. Everything is a set.
There's a real staginess to it. The one thing I noticed was, in particular, there's a scene where Friedrich March's character jumps from a low balcony.
Yeah.
They're supposedly outside, but he lands with a thump that's obviously thumping on a floor, and the whole camera shakes.
Yeah.
So there's a real staginess, and I mean, it's shot well, but you can definitely tell this is on the soundstage.
Well, you can tell this is in the 1930s.
Sure, yeah.
Because they were not shooting very much in location in 1935, to be honest. But anyhow, Richard Day was the art direction, and he won an Academy Award for this film. He actually started in the 1930s, and he worked all the way through the 1970s, and he was nominated for 20 Oscars throughout his career, and he won 7. So obviously he was very good.
Absolutely.
Some other wins he had was How Green Was My Valley,
Okay.
A Streetcar Named Desire,
Oh, wow. Some
and
good
On
movies.
the Waterfront.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So he was a very good art direction
Definitely.
person. A little bit about this film before we go into the other Academy Award nominations. This film, based in Britain, it starts out, there are children. There's a little girl. Her name is Kitty Vane.
Yep.
And she's shown in the very beginning as a young girl. She gets out of bed, she goes and sees her grandmother, and she tells her grandmother, "Oh, I'm going to see her friends, these 2 boys that live nearby." And the grandmother's trying to give her some advice about how to behave.
Sure.
And she just kind of was like, "No, I'm going to behave like this." Like, you already get the sense of like an independent spirit with her character. So what there is there's 2 families that live obviously close to each other somewhere in England, and it's very vague. But did you notice that the families were very odd family dynamics?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I was like, because I was thinking to myself, what is this family dynamic?
Yeah. Kitty's family, she lives, I think, with her grandfather.
Her father.
Is it her father? Okay. And then there's
And the grandmother. The father and the grandmother.
And then there's an adopted Lawrence, the little boy lives with them?
No, she lives with her father and her father's sister, which is her aunt.
Okay.
And the aunt has a son. That's her cousin.
Okay. I wasn't sure because they talked about at the beginning about him being adopted or not having a father.
No, they
or
were
something like
talking
that.
about Alan.
Okay, all right. So that's where I got confused.
Yeah,
okay.
it is a little
Yeah,
confusing.
it's
So
what-
her family dynamic is Kitty has a father and a grandmother. Or
Okay.
I guess it could be, I don't know that it is her father, to be honest. It could be her grandfather.
Yeah, he was older. A little older.
But yes, the one that tells her, like, be careful, be safe. And then
Yeah.
that's another thing, like, she's obviously a free spirit. The aunt does not approve of her. You can see right away the aunt doesn't approve of the way she's off doing these things. And the aunt is kind of sounds very bitter and
Yeah.
cynical. And also the son is not very pleasant either.
No.
So she's kind of in this family dynamic where she's a very independent girl. She goes off, the father or grandfather, whichever it is, lets her do whatever, and the grandmother as well. And then when you go to the other family, which is the 2 boys, Alan and Gerald, there are 2 boys there, and the mother and the grandfather as well. So the mother is Gerald's mother, and the young boy, Alan, that is the adopted one that you're talking about, that they sort of bring into the family, and he refers to Gerald's mother as aunt.
Okay. That's where I was confused.
Yeah,
And
it's a little confusing.
It did take, well, especially when you're watching on YouTube.
Yes,
and you have that it's not the
yes.
greatest sound, and you can't. There's no closed caption.
It is a little confusing.
So I was playing catch up a little bit,
Yeah.
there at the beginning with all the different relationships and who was who.
Yeah, but it is two very strange family dynamics. You expect to see a mother and a father and
Sure.
regular children. That's not it at all in this particular story. So in the very beginning, you see the young people. Obviously, they're very attached to each other. Now, Kitty, right off the bat, clearly loves this Alan.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know in the beginning how much the young boys feel about her. They seem to like having her around, but they don't necessarily think of her that way.
I got the sense that Gerald was more into her, but she was more into
Yeah,
Alan.
I mean, she was very clearly like
Yeah, because
Alan.
there's that scene where she tries to give Alan a gift.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I don't want to give it to Gerald.
Gerald.
She's like, okay, Gerald, here you go. And Gerald's all excited to get it.
Yes.
So yeah, there's a real love triangle dynamic
Yes.
there already when they're little.
Right when they're little, and she's already saying she wants to marry him,
Yeah.
like right off the bat. So that's how it kind of starts out. So you already get the characters all kind of established right off the bat.
Yeah.
And then it goes to a time lapse, and suddenly they're all adults. And it's almost like a copy of the first scene. She's now an adult. She runs in, she talks to her grandmother.
everything's the
It's
same.
almost
They're just
the same.
older.
She's
Yeah.
just an adult now, and now she's Merle Oberon, because Merle Oberon plays Kitty Vane. And she goes over to see the boys, who are now adults, and Alan is played by Frederick March, and Gerald is played by Herbert Marshall.
Mm-hmm.
And the boys are getting ready to go to war.
Yeah.
And this is World War I. And they're in their uniforms. They're going off to the war. And, of course, the mother and Kitty are really upset. Obviously, Kitty's still very in love with Alan, and she's very interested in Alan. But now you start to see that Gerald does definitely have an interest in her.
Sure.
But you still don't get the sense so much that Alan is as interested in her.
Correct.
So you're still in that sort of crux. And so they go off to war. They come back on a leave, a furlough or a leave. And that is when, after having been at war, I guess Alan has realized how much he does care about Kitty, and they want to decide to get married while they're on the furlough.
Yeah.
And there's a really poignant scene. It's really sad for Gerald, but they come running in. They're all excited to tell people about their engagement, and they run into Gerald first.
Yeah.
And you can just see them sober, and they tell him, and you can see that he's trying to be a good sport. There's a lot of nobleness in this film, a
Absolutely.
lot of self-sacrifice.
Yeah.
This is as
Very
fine,
British.
The characters are as fine characters as you can find. So he puts aside his own feelings, and he congratulates them and wishes them well. And they want to go get married, but then they find out that their leave is being taken away because they're needed on the front.
Yeah, they'd be rushed back.
So they can't get married. They're not able to get married, and they're really upset about that. Yeah, I feel like I do.
No, it's fine. They go and they basically say the final scene with them at home before they have to go back is Alan and Kitty at church, and they're asking this pastor or priest or whatever to marry them, and he's like, no, I can't do it right now. It's too soon. We got to go through all the rigmarole. So they say, well, we can't find anybody. I guess they've talked to a lot of people. This is their last ditch effort. So they say, you know what? I'm saying I'm married to you.
Yes.
We're standing in front of a church. We can't get anybody to say the words for us. We're going to say it. We're married now. So they decide when he goes back to wherever they're stationed. Did they say where they were stationed? I can't remember.
There's a name for the
Yeah,
town.
closer to the front where he's stationed, but there's still civilians there. Kitty goes with him, and they're going to spend the night together as husband and wife.
Yes.
But when they're there, we brought up Lawrence, the young man who was kind of annoying when
The
they were little.
cousin.
The cousin, yeah. He comes in, and he sees Alan going up to his room. He has flowers. He has wine. He's like, oh, you got a girl up there, huh?
Yep.
And Alan wants to protect Kitty because he knows not everybody's going to understand.
They're not actually
They're not
married.
actually married, so he doesn't want to damage her reputation. So he just kind of oh, yeah, whatever, and runs away. And Lawrence tells Gerald about
Yes,
this.
and Lawrence is quite the annoying little twit.
Yeah, he's a gossip. Yeah.
The character is very unpleasant.
Yeah.
A very unpleasant character. The next day, when they're actually boarding the ship to go, he comes up and starts talking about it to Alan in front of Gerald and saying, oh, what about that girl? Something along those lines. And so Gerald is like, wait, what is this?
Yeah.
What are you doing with a girl?
Yeah.
He gets infuriated because obviously he cares about Kitty. He loves Kitty. And he thinks that Alan has some other girl and he's cheating on Kitty. And
Yeah.
that's what he believes. And Alan does. I don't know why Alan can't tell Gerald the truth.
You would think, yeah, that was a little confusing. Again, it's 1935.
Part of the plot, I
yeah,
guess.
it's for the
It was
plot
an
to happen.
important part of the plot.
But yeah, I think it's one of those things where they come from, you can tell it's established, they come from decent families,
Yes.
decent homes. It's that kind of world where the family reputation is very
Mm-hmm.
important. So again, it seems like Gerald would understand.
Right.
But again, for story purposes, plot purposes, whatever, he keeps it to himself.
Yeah, Alan doesn't tell them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now they have a little bit of a riff, right? So Gerald doesn't like Alan. Not that he doesn't like him, but he doesn't
He's
like
angry with
that.
him, yeah.
And he feels a lack of respect for that. And it's make them very angry. So they go off to war. And then a little bit later, you see them. They're at the front. They're in the war zone. And Alan comes up asking Gerald for some leave. He says, hey, I want to take some leave. I want to go back and I want to marry Kitty.
Yes.
And Gerald says, no. I'm not giving you the leave because of the way you run around with other women. That was his reasoning. He was angry about it. And Alan, again, doesn't tell him, but then somebody comes in and says, oh, there's a big push or whatever.
Yeah, big skirmish.
Yeah, something's going on, and we need volunteers to help, and can you guys volunteer? And Gerald says, well, I'm not taking people that don't want to volunteer or something. Like he says it at Alan. So then, of course, Alan feels challenged, and he says, well, I am volunteering. I'm going to volunteer. As if he doesn't want to be called coward, I guess.
Sure, yeah.
I guess that's kind of what they were
Yeah, and
getting
again,
at.
like I said, it's very British, stiff upper lip kind of stuff. This is what we're here for, so we got to do.
Yeah, so, and then the next thing you see is that there's some big explosion, and Gerald comes back in, and he's got his head on his hands, and he's saying, oh, Alan, Alan. And at the same time, Kitty is shown back at her home, and she starts screaming, like she knows something is
Well,
happening.
it's been established, and I want to get your take on this, what you think this represents or what this means, if it's literal or figurative or what. But the scene where they're children, they're out having a little picnic under a tree, and this big gust of wind comes. And Alan says, this is a warning. And it's almost like he's saying it just to scare her, kind of like a ghost story type thing. This is a warning. And during that battle scene, at the battle, there's a big gust of wind. And then they cut to Kitty. She's at home, and a big gust of wind comes through her window, and she starts screaming like she knows something wrong. So what was your take on that
Well,
part?
I mean, obviously they're creating that as a symbolic thing in the film. And they're also kind of showing you that there's a connection between Alan and Kitty that goes beyond the physical. They're almost mentally connected.
Yeah, definitely.
She knows right away that something has happened.
Yeah.
And she's nowhere near the front.
Definitely.
But yeah, that wind is definitely a symbol of some sort.
Sure. Let's talk about that scene for a minute, that battle scene you're talking about, because I kind of dumped on the set design a little bit earlier. I will say I love that scene.
Okay.
And just to set the stage, what's happening is what you spoke of, they have that meeting where they're all together, we need volunteers, we got to go. It's like, we got to go now. So they all leave. And they're in one of those, you see in a lot of movies, those World War I bunkers where they have like a very Spartan area, but they have a desk and it's an office area, barracks, whatever. And they leave that, and the door's open. And as they go through, the camera pans over to that doorway, and that's when the wind comes in. And then you just get, the stage is empty. There's no one there. There's no people left. But you get the explosions, and you see the lights and the flashes, and you hear the gunfire and the cannon fire and everything. And it goes on for a while. It's kind of an extended moment where you know what's happening. And then that's when Gerald comes back with his injuries, and he's lamenting the loss of Alan. And I love that because, like you said, it's 1935. We're not going to get a big battle scene. And I respect the fact that they didn't try. A very creative way, a very artistic way to present that information. I really like that.
Yeah, and then also I guess another important point in that is the picture that they put on the desk. There's a picture that before this whole scene happens, or right before they go out on the battlefield, Gerald pulls out this picture he has of him. Actually, they both have a picture. Gerald has a picture, but in his picture, Kitty is looking at him. Did you notice that?
No, I didn't.
And when Alan takes out his picture, Kitty's looking at Alan. And on the back, it says the same exact thing. In writing, it says, take care of each other, Kitty. It's the same picture, just she's looking at Gerald and Gerald's picture, and she's looking at Alan and Alan's picture. But it's the same exact picture of the three of them. So that picture is set on the desk, and I think it's one of the last things you see in the scene. Like you sort of cut to the picture.
It like fades off. The camera's moving around that room after Gerald comes back, and you go back to that picture. But I didn't notice that. That's a nice touch. I thought it was the pictures were identical.
Yeah,
I didn't notice that she was facing different ways.
Yeah. So anyhow, that's what we see, and then Gerald winds up coming back, and they're obviously all heartbroken. They miss Alan. Something I thought was kind of symbolic was as soon as he came in, he said, "Where's old Pete?" or whatever the dog's name was. And she said, "Oh, he's gone." And he said, "Well, it's really not the same without old Pete." And it's like, are we really talking about that, or are we talking about Alan?
Definitely.
So you kind of get that sense there. But then an interesting twist occurs
Yeah.
in the plot. At first, it's confusing because you're like, "What's going on?" Because it seems to be this room full of men with the speaker talking about sacrifice, and you start to realize it's a room of blind men,
Yeah.
men who have lost their sight because of the war. And then we see that Alan is there. So Alan is not dead, but he's lost his sight.
Sure.
He can't see. So he's in this program for some period of time, they don't really say, where he's learning how to cope with being blind.
Yeah. Sometimes past, they established that he was actually captured.
Oh, right.
He was in a prison camp, and he was in a
Correct.
German hospital for a while. So they don't tell you how long it's been, but it's been a while. He's made his way back. I'm assuming the war's over at this point because
Yeah, it does seem, yeah.
the prisoners have been released or whatever. So he's back, and he's in this system. It's like a group home kind of for these
Right.
blind soldiers.
Yeah, and so then there's a fellow there that runs the place called Sir George, and he's very concerned about Alan Frederick March. He's now changed his name to Roger Crane or something, some
Yeah.
other name. And he's very concerned about him because he doesn't feel like he's trying to go back to his old life.
Yeah, the gentleman you're talking about kind of deduces that Alan's living under a different
Assuming.
identity. He's changed his name. He wants to keep the fact that he's still alive a secret from somebody.
Right. And the reason he does that is because, again, we're being noble and
Yeah.
self-sacrificing. He doesn't want to burden Kitty with having a blind
Exactly,
husband. He
yeah.
thinks it's going to burden her.
Sure.
So eventually Sir George gets him to go back home, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to go back home. And he's really excited. He's talking on the train about how excited he is and talking about all these things. And the fellow that they sent with him to help him out, it says something on the train that just affects him. And then he starts to think about what it would be like for Kitty.
Yeah.
And he says, I'm not stopping. And he doesn't get off. And he just moves on. And they wind up staying at this other place with this lady. I guess she kind of runs a house. Maybe it's like a boarding house. And she has a couple kids. There's a little girl and two little boys. And he winds up living there and actually bonding with the children. And
Yeah.
the children ask him, what did you want to be when you were young? And he said, I wanted to be a writer. And they said, okay, well, why don't you start writing? And the boy's like, well, he's blind. He can't see. Which,
Yeah.
okay, we know. you know. But he's very patient with the children.
Yeah.
And then he does start telling them stories. And then the landlady, or whatever, the lady that runs the boarding house, Mrs. West is her name, she starts taking down and then you see that he's actually publishing these children's
Yeah.
books. So all that's happening. And then in the meantime, Kitty and Gerald don't know anything about this at all.
Yeah, and
he's living under an assumed name.
And at this point, they've kind of established a relationship with each other.
Right.
In the loss of Alan,
Bonded them
they've
together.
bonded. Yeah, they're engaged now, basically.
Yes, they are engaged, but you can see that Kitty, her heart
Oh,
is
absolutely.
not for Gerald.
Yeah.
She still loves Alan.
And I think you could tell that Gerald knows that too. Like
Yeah, I think he does know that.
Yeah.
And it comes to a point, not going to go too far into the ending because it will ruin the story, and the ending is very beautiful. So basically, that's the plot. It's definitely the sort of movie that you feel like it's very touching. You feel tears coming. It's very emotional.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think, again, we don't want to spoil it, but it has a very strong, powerful ending.
Yes.
It's a very melodramatic movie.
It is. It's a melodrama
Yeah,
for sure.
and it's with all the trappings. And that's not always my favorite kind of movie,
Right.
but I think it definitely sticks the landing. You know, the ending is very sincere and very powerful.
Yeah. And so we'll just talk about a couple other things here now that we've gone through the plot.
Sure.
So also nominated for Best Sound Recording Oscar, which I don't think has anything to do with the score. I think it's
No.
basically the dialogue. I mean, we have to remember this is the early 30s and we're just learning about sound, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, again, from the viewing that we had on YouTube, we're not going to get
we don't
We're not
know.
getting the full
We need
experience
the
that
restoration.
that the 1935 Academy voters heard.
Thomas Moulton is the fellow's name that was nominated for the Oscar
Sure.
for that, but he did win 5 Oscars in his career.
Okay.
And some notable films that he did were All About Eve and Gone with the Wind.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so Thomas Moulton, very good at the
Yeah.
sound recording.
And it lost to Naughty Marietta. Have you ever seen Naughty Marietta?
I haven't.
Sounds great.
Well,
See what I did there?
yeah. No, I've never seen that film. What is it?
It won Best Sound Recording in 1935. That's the extent of my knowledge about it.
And then nominated for Best Actress, Merle Oberon.
Yeah.
And Merle hadn't been in a lot of films prior to this, to be honest. She had been in The Scarlet Pimpernel, which was a big British film.
Yeah.
It's kind of a cult film almost. Played with Leslie Howard in that. As a matter of fact, she was having an affair with Leslie Howard
Oh, okay.
during that film. And Leslie Howard was supposed to play the role of Alan in this film.
Yeah, I heard it. And they said when they broke up, they almost didn't want to cast her.
They thought that she couldn't be successful without him.
Oh, wow, okay.
So she broke up with him prior to production. Because they broke up, he didn't want to be in the film. So then they gave it to Frederick March, thank goodness, because to me, in my mind, Frederick March is one of the greatest actors.
Yeah.
But a little bit more about Merle Oberon. She was the first actress of Asian descent to be nominated for an Academy Award.
Yeah.
She had a very strange
Yeah,
family
very
dynamic.
interesting backstory to her.
Yeah. So did you read about her family?
Yeah, she was raised. Her mother was only 12 years old when she gave birth to her. And
Her
she was,
mother was raped by the stepfather.
yeah,
Yeah.
and she was raised as her mother's sister. She didn't realize that her sister was actually her mother until she was a lot
Yeah,
older.
very sad. And her grandmother was Sri Lankan. I guess it is today. Ceylon it was then at that point.
Yeah.
So she's from that area. And I guess Merle was always trying to hide the fact that she had that kind of heritage because she was afraid that people wouldn't give her roles.
Yeah.
Although Anna May Wong, wasn't she acting? I mean, I don't know. But so she did always try to hide that side of her.
Yeah.
Merle Oberon originally started out in England as a club hostess. And she wound up attracting the attention of Alexander Korda, who was a big British producer. He put her in his first film, and then he would eventually marry her. And he was also instrumental in getting her work in the U.S., and that's how she happened to come over. The Dark Angel was kind of her first big starring Hollywood film. Another thing that I thought was interesting about this film is that, of course, we're talking about the boys, Herbert Marshall and Frederick Marx, going off and fighting in World War I. Both did fight in World War I.
Okay.
The actors themselves. As a matter of fact, you may be surprised to know that Herbert Marshall was wounded in World War I on a battlefield in France. He was shot in the knee, and they amputated his leg.
Oh, really?
He played his career with a prosthetic leg.
Wow. I never
Yeah.
would have guessed that.
I never would have guessed that either
No.
because he never looked like he did.
No.
I don't know how you would look, but I would think that the prosthetic legs were not quite as
Advanced.
advanced as they are today. And it did say that it caused him a lot of discomfort his whole life, but it was only noticeable in his later years because he would limp a lot because it's so uncomfortable.
And her husband was in the war, I believe, as well, right? And
Merle?
Yeah, Merle's husband, yeah. And I think he was knighted.
Oh, Alexander Korda.
Yeah.
Alexander Korda was definitely knighted.
Yeah,
I
he
don't
was-
know whether he was in the war.
Yeah,
but
he was. I
definitely
think it was
knighted.
for service in the war. He was knighted, so she was Lady Cora.
Lady,
She was.
yes, she was.
She was
Even though
actually real nobility.
I think that she had actually was getting divorced by that
Yeah,
point in
yeah.
time,
It didn't
but-
last long, but
Yeah, but Herbert Marshall in numerous films in the 30s and 40s, but it's probably best known for The Little Foxes. He has a very big role in that. Foreign Correspondent and The Secret Garden. And of course, one of my favorites, Frederick March, is why I even watched this movie in the first place, because I love Frederick March. Nominated 5 times, won 2 Oscars for Best Actor, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and The Best Years of Our Lives, which he is fantastic in that
Yeah.
film. He's just fantastic in general.
Yeah.
The only person I think is comparable to him in the golden age of Hollywood is somebody we're going to talk about on our next show, Spencer Tracy.
sure.
If you ever have a chance, 2 heavyweight actors go head to head, you need to watch Inherit the Wind
Oh yeah.
because they just amazing to
Yeah,
watch them
definitely.
together. This was the 12th most popular picture in British box office between 1935 and 1936. And in 1962, Ross Hunter bought the rights to do a remake of this film. And he was going to do a remake starring Rock Hudson.
I heard about that.
And it was going to be like based in the Korean War
Yeah.
instead of World War I, but the film never got
went
made.
anywhere.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about the cast too. I want to point out, we talked about the early scenes where the kids, kid
Yes.
versions. I thought the child actress who played Kitty was great.
Cora Sue Collins.
Yeah, I looked her up. She has 47 credits, but she retired from acting at the age of 18.
Oh.
So she really packed them in there when she was younger, but I think she brought a lot of energy. I kind of wish they would have stayed. There would have been a little more
Of the children.
of the children establishing the relationship there, because I think they all did a great job. But she kind of had like that Shirley Temple energy to her. She was a really nice addition.
She
to the
was
movie.
very cute and bouncy.
Yeah. And she made a good young Merle Oberon.
Yeah, she did. The kids, you could see they sort of looked like the adult versions.
Definitely.
I also thought the little girl that played Betty, she was really cute too.
Yeah.
Her name is Faye. Ooh, Faye Chaldecott. Chaldecott? My pronunciations don't come for me. But she played the little girl Betty when he goes to the boarding house, and she's very sweet with him. And
Yeah, that was a really
loves
cute
him.
dynamic. I like how they had him kind of establishing a new life, like you said.
Yes.
He got a new career. He was writing. He was publishing.
And he was sort of happy.
Yeah, he's happy.
He had gotten into a happy state.
He had a relationship with his family and this little girl in particular. That relationship was really nice, too.
Yeah, they were very cute together, and
Yeah.
he seemed to become part of the family.
And even in his blindness, he adapted pretty well.
Yes.
And again, like you said, it's that
what
nobility
do
of
yeah.
suck it up. But I think he really rebounded well.
He made the best
Made the
of it.
most of it, yeah, definitely.
And what do you think about Frederick playing blind?
I think he did okay. I think he did a good job. I don't put it on him because I think the movie didn't seem too concerned with showing he was blind, if that makes sense. It wasn't like he was still a lot of the time. He would kind of like glance off to the side. And even there are scenes where he's not so much trying to let people onto the fact that he's
Right.
blind.
He's a non-blind person playing a blind person who's pretending not to be blind.
Exactly, yeah. And I think he does a good job at it, but I don't know if the movie sets him up well enough to give him the chance to really express that.
Yeah,
much.
and
That
then
makes sense.
again, we're also getting a poor quality version of the
Yeah,
movie,
exactly,
so who
yeah.
knows what it really looked like back in the day. So I'm terrified to ask you your star rating.
Oh
on
no!
this.
I mean, I enjoy. Like I said, there were some slow parts. There were some parts where, like I said, the melodrama was set to 11. It's very overdone. But like I said, I think it sticks to landing well, and I think it's overall. I think it's worth watching. I'm going to give this one a 3. Like you, I am kind of stingy with my ratings.
Yes.
So 3 isn't bad for me. Definitely worth checking out,
I'm-
especially if you like the older melodramas.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 3.5 because there's a lot of very quality work here that we can't unfortunately see because of
Sure.
what we're dealing with. But anything with Frederick Marchin is good in my book.
Let's revisit it when we get that Criterion edition.
Yes.
Maybe we'll get more out of it that time.
Somebody help us. The Dark Angel, it deserves better. Greg Tolan deserves much better than this. So, yes, that is The Dark Angel. Again, you can see it on YouTube. It will not be a great quality, but you can see it, and you can certainly at least get the gist of the film
Absolutely.
and watch the film and take it with a grain of salt for the quality. That's not what the original quality is, I'm sure.
Definitely.
And we will see you next time on the Silver Screen Time Machine, Wendy and Kirk's Classic Film Review.
See you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Silver Screen Time Machine.
Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a comment and review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Intro music composed by Heidi Engel.
Outro music composed by Maximus Monk.
Artwork by Tyler Birch.
Produced and edited by Wendy Wittick and Kirk Kolkowski.
Recorded at PCTV Studios in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time.